Hello and welcome to another episode of Feeding Fatty. I'm Roy.
I'm Terry.
So, we try to bring guests that can help us with our, not only our nutrition, eating, but also exercise, anything that's on the spectrum. We believed in a balanced approach, and we found a very interesting gentleman to have on with us today. His name is Mike Benayoun. He is with 196 Flavors. First off, Mike, welcome. Thanks for taking time to be with us.
Yes.
196 Flavors was founded in 2012. It started as a fun project to prepare and document a dish from every country in the world, and it eventually led them to a much bigger venture with the lofty goal of becoming the Wikipedia of authentic and traditional recipes with a focus on culinary history. With the help of chefs and experts from the local country or region, they've thoroughly researched and validated their recipes and articles to ensure people have one place online to access legit representation of authentic recipes and from 196 countries that cover our planet. So they now feature 1,100 recipes and articles in 3 languages, English, French, Spanish, with traffic that will surpass 15 million page views in 2020. Mike, that is awesome. Glad to have you to the show.
Oh my.
Thank you so much for having me, Roy and Terry. Really appreciate. Very excited to talk about how we got started and kind of where we are and what our goals are. But we kind of summarize what we're all about.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing project that you thought to try a recipe from every country, and then of course making it authentic, getting the chefs and some local people involved. I mean, it's just what a project. I bet it's been
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny because when we started, like you said, I mean, it was really a hobby and it was really nothing more than a fun idea that I had in the back of my mind for a few years. And I suggested it to my best friend, Vera, who is my business partner now. And she jumped on it. She was like, let's do it. So it took us about a year and a half to finish the dish from every country. The thing is, at the time, we were probably not as thorough in our research as we are now, because again, it was just for fun. And we're like, all right. If it's not the exact authentic recipe, no big deal. But now we have other ambitions, and we are much more thorough. And if it's interesting, I can tell you kind of our process in terms of research and kind of how we go about it.
So have y'all?
And was that so? Is your background in as a chef? Is that what you did, or what did you do as work?
Absolutely not. My background is in cooking and eating since I was a kid. So my background,
I too.
like a lot of people. No, my background is more in the software industry. So
Okay.
I have been. I studied more on the technical side, and then over time, I morphed more into biz dev and sales and marketing. So my day job is actually a VP of biz dev for a software startup.
Okay.
And my night job or my weekend job is the blog or the website.
Well, that's cool. Have y'all
Other hours.
have you surpassed one recipe from each country, or y'all gonna like build on that once you get that initial? Well, y'all already got the initial one, but are you just gonna keep building that out?
Yeah, so we do have that was our initial goal, right? So to have one recipe from each country in the world, which we finished in a year and a half. Since then, what we have done is initially we were focusing on one country per week. For the past 4 years, we've been doing one country or one region per month. So this month, for example, we're doing the Nordic region, which encompasses 5 countries: Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland. But typically we focus on one country. And what we typically do is we're going to have, so now we actually work with contributors. So it's not just Vera and myself.
Okay.
We have, depending on the time of the year, we have between 5 and 10 contributors who help us.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is they actually, what we do is we source the recipes So typically what we would do is we source the recipes in the local language. So we go to the source. We try to find authentic recipes from credible sources, sometimes chefs, sometimes cookbook authors, a lot of times in the local language, not only, but a lot of times in the local language. So that what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at different representations of the same recipe, authentic recipe, and we come up with our own version, which we try, is going to, what we're trying to do is trying to capture the essence of the authentic recipe. And as you know, we can never say there's one version of every authentic recipe, right? It doesn't, it doesn't go like this.
Yeah.
There's an evolution of recipes. Every chef is going to have their own twist over time. But, obviously there are some rules to follow, some guidelines in terms of ingredients and so on. So that's what we're trying to do in capturing the essence of the recipe.
Yes.
Once we've done that, we actually give those recipes to our contributors. So we source the recipe, we have our own research process, and we give those recipes to our contributors who have to follow to the letter those recipes. But in addition to that, because our contributors are like us, right? They're not really trained chefs, or they're not for this month, they're not necessarily from the region or country. So in addition to that, we have one additional layer of validation. We actually do collaborate with chefs, renowned chefs from the region or from the country. That adds another layer of validation and credibility to our project, because now we have somebody, for example, from Sweden, who is going to, can you hold on? I'm sorry about that. Somebody's knocking on my door.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. It happens. Oh, man. That is so, that is an amazing task.
Yeah, and what a geography lesson, too.
196. Yes. And and so many, just different regions. You think about our little world. We're in Texas, but the United States. There's just so many different. Just the difference in the recipes and their different regions and everything.
Well, yeah, and even in families, I just think about our family. We've got the faction that is the mayonnaise in the potato salad, and the one that's the mustard in the potato salad. So it's like,
right.
What a project. No, we were just talking about,
Yeah, we were just talking about the.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, we were talking about the geography involved. Number one, what, I guess. It was
not
good
just the countries, the individual countries, but the different regions of the countries and how it all evolved there.
Yeah. Are you going to be able to?
No, we're fine. We're just keeping on moving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the research process. And the fact that we do the research on the recipes, we provide those recipes to our contributors. There's an additional layer of validation, not just for the recipe, but also for the article about the recipe, because we're not just a recipe website, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, like I said earlier, and like you mentioned, Roy, we really want to become the Wikipedia, the source of truth, more like an encyclopedia of authentic recipes.
Right.
So what we discuss typically in our article is origin of the recipe, the origin of the name sometimes, how it has evolved over time, because recipes, evolve over time, and any kind of stories on the recipe itself, but also sometimes on the ingredients that compose the recipe. Some of them might be unique in nature, very representative of the region. But a lot of times what we have found over the past 8 years that we've been doing this is, at the end of the day, yes, there might be some local ingredients here and there, but a chicken is a chicken. So whether it's in the Nordics or in France or in the US, a chicken is a chicken. What you make of the chicken is what's going to be representative of the cuisine of the region, whether it's spices, cooking techniques, combination of ingredients, and so on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do y'all give guidance on on the particular spices? It may not be something readily available here in the States, but do y'all give guidance on where somebody may be able to obtain that?
So we're not the biggest fan of substitutions because we are all about authenticity.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm going to say that nowadays in 2020, especially with the internet, you can pretty much find anything you want online.
Yeah.
So it's it's very easy to source ingredients. And yeah, I've never had any problem sourcing ingredients.
Yeah. So what about cooking styles? I mean, we're used to the States. We have kitchen, we have ovens, but, I'd read not too long ago that probably still 75% of the population cooks outside or something wildly high number like that. So I guess the difference is in, like maybe what we think about a Dutch oven versus outside on an open flame versus on a stovetop. How has that worked out?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. So in most cases, you're right. We may change sometimes the cooking methods to cook inside as opposed to outside.
Yeah.
So there are some nuances. We always try to stay as close as possible to the authentic recipe.
Right.
But there's been occasions where you could get the same results. And by the way, the recipe has evolved to a point. I can mention one example. There's a recipe called Kuzi, Quzi, from Iraq. And this is supposed to be originally, it's a centuries-old recipe of typically an entire lamb that is open and stuffed, like the entire lamb is actually stuffed. Obviously cooked outdoors on an open flame. The recipe has evolved to a point where chefs are not cooking an entire lamb anymore. They're actually cooking pieces of lamb in a Dutch oven or larger pot. But everything is cooked together. So it's still called a kuzi. It's just the recipe has evolved to make it easier for modern chefs to cook, and it's totally acceptable.
Okay.
Okay.
So what was what's one of the most unique regions or unique countries that you got? I can't even think. 196. I mean, that's kind of,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
So I'm going to say the most unique, not necessarily my favorite, but the most unique in terms of cuisine that I was not familiar with, and I think most people are not familiar with, is the cuisine of West Africa. And our Western palates are probably not that used to the flavors and some of the ingredients of Western African cuisine. There are some really, really good dishes. One of my favorites actually on the site is called Tiboudienne or chap from Senegal, which is typically whole fish with a bunch of vegetables, some specific spices, one very pungent spice that I think it's called netetu. When you smell it, it's really, really pungent. But when you use it in cooking, like a lot of ingredients, it actually is tamed as you cook it and as you simmer it. So there are some really, really good dishes like this one. However, I think in general, our palates, and I talked to a friend about it, our palates are probably not that used to it. It's interesting because a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, for 1 year, I actually hosted cooking classes here in Los Angeles. And the first cooking class that I decided to host was a class on Western African cuisine with a friend of mine from Gambia and from Senegal as well. So she helped me host. We had like 35 people. It was a pretty successful cooking class.
Wow.
And again, trying to make this cuisine more popular in here in LA, but in the Western world in general, was very exciting.
Wow. Do you find like United States, do we use a lot of salt? Maybe trying to make up for lack of knowing about the different spices and how to use them? I mean,
I think,
is that a thing?
It's possible. I'm not really exposed to that. I think in processed food, definitely yes.
Yes.
But I'm going to say, in general, at least my friends, my entourage, my family here, not
Not
really.
so much.
I haven't really noticed it. What I have noticed, though, is yes, there's probably less use of spices in general, or probably the same over and over. it's interesting because I'm really not a picky person. I'm really, I really love to eat and cook, and I'm really not picky. But there is one spice that is way overused in the US that I really can't stand. It's cinnamon.
Really? Okay.
So with the season
Interesting.
right now, it's not my favorite season, as you can expect.
Yeah,
When you
yeah.
go to the stores and what. I like cinnamon. The problem here is it's not the same cinnamon as it's used in other parts of the world. So there's two types, the Ceylon and Cassia, and the one that is used here, which is typically used a lot in powder form, where we do use it in ground form in other regions, right? I'm not saying it's specific to the US, but there's a lot of dishes where you just use one stick and you remove it, and it's fine. But when you use the ground form of cinnamon, I think it's way overpowering. And I always joke with my friends by saying that I think cinnamon grows inside apples in this country because there's no dessert that has apples that doesn't have cinnamon. It just goes hand in hand.
Right, exactly.
That's true. Yeah.
So,
I always get, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to say, so I'm not a big vegetable person, so I know the main categories like a potato and broccoli and some things, but I guess as you go across the world, are there different vegetables and that you run into that maybe some other countries use a lot more of?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously I have been exposed to different fruits and vegetables alike over the course of the past 8 years. One that comes to mind is one called banana flour, which is used in a lot of Asian dishes. I can think of one soup from Laos, very popular actually. I think it's one of the national dishes over there called khao pun, which is made with different types of vegetables, but one of them being the banana flour. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's. I think it's more about the texture than the taste itself. To be very frank.
Okay.
Has any of you two have it or
Never. No.
No.
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I was going to say, not that I'm aware of.
They slipped it in.
Like, when you open the banana flour, you're not supposed to eat the outer skin, but the inside is very similar to I'm gonna say like soybean sprouts, but a little
Okay.
Stiffer and kind of straight as opposed to supple.
Yeah,
We're
interesting.
gonna have to check that out. Roy can't wait to try it, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
another
right.
one I can think
Oh my
is the cashew fruit. I don't know if you've had it. So there's the cashew nut that we're all aware of, but there's the cashew apple or cashew fruit, as it's called. It's interesting because it's kind of sweeter fruit, of course, but you can taste the aftertaste of the cashew nut. Definitely, you can taste the same fruit.
Yeah.
It comes from the same plant.
Oh, I would like that.
So how did you go about sourcing this? I mean, Canada and Mexico are both our neighbors here, but if I wanted to call down there to figure out a dish, I wouldn't even know who to dial first. So how did y'all go about gathering the resources in all the different countries?
So it's fairly easy to find cookbooks, credible sources online nowadays. I think in the past we would have had to go to the library, but it's pretty easy to find credible sources, in cookbooks like of renowned authors, most of the time from the country, and obviously they have the credibility. And then, like I said, we have those recipes validated by our chefs when we have a chef. Okay. So by doing this research very easily, we can find at least. For Canada, it might be a little more difficult. I don't think we have as many, but Mexico has a rich cuisine, and there's quite a few resources for finding those recipes.
Okay, interesting.
So what recipes are the most popular on your site?
So good question. It's interesting because when you look at any website, at the end of the day, it's to be popular. In the internet world, it's a game you play with Google. It's called search engine optimization. Right. So there are the recipes that are quote unquote more popular are the ones where we rank better than others, right? on Google.
Right.
So when you search for that recipe, if we appear in the first 3 results, chances are this recipe is going to be the most popular on our website.
Okay.
But having said that, there are some recipes where we rank pretty high. One of them that I can think of, which is actually one that I became familiar with when I moved to Los Angeles from Paris 20 years ago. Because as you may know, I don't know if you know, but Los Angeles has the largest Iranian population after Tehran. So it's as a joke, it's often called Tehrangeles because there's really a huge Persian community here. So I became familiar with Persian cuisine, which is really, really good. And one of the dishes, they have a lot of stews, beside the kebab, of course, but they have a lot of stews that they serve with rice. One of them is called horme sabzi. And horme sabzi is this very unique stew, which is made with maybe 5 or 6 different herbs, fenugreek, parsley, cilantro, onion, like different herbs, greens, and they are sautéed, kind of reduced. A lot of the water is evaporates as you saute the herbs, and then you use it as a base for a stew where you incorporate beef, red kidney beans, and then another unique ingredient, more kind of a spice called limo amani. What it is a dried lime. It's almost black, and it's like rock solid. It's dry, really, really dry. And you put a stew in the stew, and it gives this kind of sour taste, really, really good. That is very unique to this stew. So you cook it for a few hours, and then you serve it over Persian rice. This is actually one of our top 3 recipes on the site right now.
Oh my, that sounds lovely. Oh, I'm gonna have to try that.
It's really good. So it's interesting because, like I said, I discovered this dish 20 years ago. However, I was born in France, but my background is from North Africa. So both my parents are Jewish from North Africa. My mother was Tunisian, and my father is half Moroccan, half Algerian. So I was more raised on my mother's side of the family. And there's a very, very typical dish, which is more like a Jewish Tunisian dish called kaila. And I was raised on it. And kaila in concept, it's interesting because although it tastes completely different than horme sabzi, it is very, very similar in concept to horme sabzi because as opposed to the 5 or 6 herbs that I was talking about, we just use spinach and we use more oil. And you actually saute the spinach for probably at least 3 hours, believe it or not.
Wow.
I have a technique now which is not authentic, but you can cut down this time in 45 minutes in the microwave, and it works. But you kind of reduce the spinach. Again, spinach is probably 95% water, right? So you reduce it to a form which is very, very black-green. And again, you use that spinach confit, if you will, to make a base for a stew. Same thing, we add beef. We use white beans as opposed to red beans in the horme sabzi. There's no sour agent, but we add harissa, if you know about harissa, the chili paste, which is Tunisian. Not a lot of people know that, but it's originally Tunisian. And we put coriander, cilantro, mint, and we serve it over couscous because our rice in North Africa is couscous. The rice is
okay.
over there.
Oh, very interesting.
So do you have any good...
So what do you...
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just
I
going
was gonna ask. Go.
Yeah, for those
You
of you
go.
that don't, we'll go ahead and say for those of you who don't know, we got a little bit of delay. Terry's actually in Hawaii, so have just a little bit of an audio difficulty. But go ahead. I'm going to let you speak the whole sentence.
No, I was just gonna ask. What are your favorite? What are some of your favorite recipes on there? I mean,
So
on your site.
the last recipe I just mentioned, is obviously one of my favorites because I was raised on it.
Yeah.
So I'm very biased towards this one.
Yeah.
But the discoveries I have made, one cuisine which I really didn't know anything about that I discovered that I'm really, really, and I don't cook a lot but of this, but I really like is Peruvian cuisine. So Peruvian cuisine was actually a discovery to me. I don't think I had Peruvian food before. And especially one dish, which I made a few times recently for some reason, It's called lomo saltado. And in Peru, the interesting thing is, as you may know, there's been a lot of Asian influence with the immigration from China as well as from Japan. And there is a cuisine within Peruvian cuisine, which is called Chufa cuisine, C-H-U-F-A. Chufa cuisine is actually interesting. It's a fusion cuisine of Peruvian and Chinese, and which is very popular, and which is now part of the authentic Peruvian repertoire. You know, it's not like just something that is recent. It's actually something that is totally part of Peruvian cuisine. And lomo saltado is definitely one of those fusion dishes. It's interesting because it's a combination of sauteed beef, typically sirloin, and it's mixed with tomatoes, red onion, but also soy sauce, and it's sauteed with garlic and so on. But then you add French fries to it, because Peru is probably the biggest consumer of potatoes. I think they have like 2,000 species of potatoes over there.
Wow.
That's where potatoes originated. So they're really big on potato dishes. But after that, they actually mix it with white rice, which is more the Asian influence, with obviously the sauté, stir fry, and soy sauce. So you get this weird dish. You know, when you think about it, you're like, okay, French fries, sautéed beef and vegetables, rice. Like, it sounds weird. It's actually one of my favorite dishes on the website.
Interesting.
Wow.
So that brings up a couple questions. First off, what is the mix between more of a vegetarian style versus the dishes with protein? And then kind of a follow-up to that is going to be, so what is the most common protein that you found used in the dishes?
Sure. So interestingly enough, humans have always been carnivores and omnivores, right? Mm-hmm. But interestingly enough, when you look at authentic cuisine, especially in the past 10 to 15 centuries, meat has always been an expensive produce.
All right.
So when you think about it, a lot of those authentic recipes, not all of them, but a lot of them, always had a vegetarian version, which was more for the poor people, and then kind of a festive version with meat added to it. So what this means is, even though there's obviously a lot of recipes that include meat on our website, we also have a lot of vegan and vegetarian dishes. Depending on the country and region, it's going to be more or less difficult to find meatless or vegan or vegetarian dishes. For example, South America is very meat heavy, so I just talked about Peru. There are actually a few dishes without meat, but you would be hard pressed to find dishes without meat in Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil. Those countries are very big meat eaters.
Right.
Central and Eastern European countries, same thing, meat and potatoes.
Okay, interesting.
Just like Fort Worth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So as you put these dishes together, what would you say is the most used protein from around the globe?
I'm probably going to say chicken. It's probably the most pervasive. Yes, slowly, maybe shortly after, it's beef. There's a lot of Muslim countries, of course, so I would have said pork, but of course you're not going to have a lot of pork-based dishes in most of the 30 to 35 Muslim countries. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So what about a dish that has a fun story or fun fact or that went behind it?
There's a lot, actually, because we always try to find stories behind the recipes. So, in preparation for our talk, I prepared kind of few interesting stories, and we can go through them. But one which I thought was interesting, because I'm going to ask you a question. What is the most popular Vietnamese dish, that the first one that would pop up in your mind?
Uh-oh.
Okay, a hint. It's a soup.
Oh,
what is it?
It's a soup. It's very popular in the U.S.
like
Oh,
miso
oh.
soup or something. Is that it?
No, that would be Japanese.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the most common
Oh
that
my
you see
gosh.
in every Vietnamese restaurant across the world, not just in the US, is pho. So it's
Oh, okay.
PHO.
Okay.
It's pho
Yeah.
soup.
Oh, see, and
So
I say it wrong anyway.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, actually, pho comes from French. There's a very authentic traditional dish called pot-au-feu, P-O-T-A-U-F-E-U. F-E-U in French is fire. So it's pot under on the fire, and it's a bunch of vegetables and meat, kind of a soup, but soup slash stew that is very popular. It's a centuries old recipe. Now, interestingly enough, so pho actually comes from French. And even though it's probably the first recipe that would come to mind when we think about Vietnamese cuisine, it's barely 100 years old, and it was really created, like I said, it has a French influence, and it's kind of a fusion dish, with beef. It's funny because it's not as popular and as widely consumed in Vietnam. It's more of a dish that's consumed outside of Vietnam. And like I said, it's only barely 100 years old. So it's not even an ancestral recipe. There's dozens of Vietnamese recipes that are way older than this one. However, this is the one that everybody knows around the world.
Okay.
So that brings up kind of a good point too. Is there's, probably like the U.S., there are a lot of dishes and there are a lot of popular dishes. So how did you decide the initial pick from each country?
So at first, in probably the first 3 or 4 years, we were just picking the dishes that we liked. Okay, so it was just Vera, my best friend, and I picking dishes. We're like, okay, this month we're gonna do Peru. Let's pick 3 dishes each, and there was no more research than this.
Okay.
Now, because we're more of a business and we work with contributors and so on, so we run it as a business now, we do more research, and typically we're going to find 40, 50, 60 recipes for each month, and we're going to pick the ones that are the most popular. And what we mean by the most popular is really the recipes that are the most searched by people online. Because obviously we want people to find us, and we want people to find the recipes that are the most searched. So now we do a little more research into what are really the most popular recipes in the country.
Okay.
Oh, it's all about traffic.
It's exactly, and like I said, it's a business too now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess as we kind of wrap this up, my favorite dessert. Did you highlight any dessert dishes?
In the dessert, there's a lot. I have a sweet tooth.
Yeah.
So being French, for me, a meal without a dessert at the end is not a meal.
Right, exactly.
No.
Without bread is not a meal either.
Yes.
So there's quite a lot. I'm trying to think. So my favorite, which is very popular, and I did not discover it with the website, of course, is creme brulee.
Okay.
So, being French, of course, I'm a little biased towards French pastries and French desserts, but yeah, creme brulee is probably at the top of my list, which happens to be gluten-free. I know there's a lot of people nowadays that are gluten-free.
Yeah.
It is full of lactose, though,
Yeah.
and sugar, but fairly easy to make, not as complicated, as long as you have a torch to caramelize the sugar on top.
Right.
But and with easy to find ingredients, it's pretty much eggs, sugar, milk, heavy milk, and that's it. So, and vanilla for the flavor.
So what about drinks? Did y'all look at I know a lot of overseas wine is a natural drink with the dinner, but was there anything that came to light on that?
So my signature cocktail over the past few years has become pisco sour. So I don't know if you've had it before. And again, coming back to Peruvian cuisine, I discovered that when we virtually traveled to Peru. Pisco is a kind of a brandy that is originally from Peru as well as Chile. It's probably the most consumed liqueur over there. And they have a cocktail called pisco sour. which is made with pisco, with lime, simple syrup, and egg whites. And then you shake it. So the trick here is, like most cocktails that you make with egg whites, you have to shake it without the ice, otherwise it doesn't foam as well.
Okay.
So you shake it first, then you add the ice to chill it. You pour it, and then you add a few drops of Angostura bitters, which is the same bitters that is used in Old Fashioned, for example. It has become my favorite cocktail. Slowly, shortly after is probably caipirinha and mojito.
And a mojito. How about a margarita?
I like margarita. So interesting fact about margarita. Do you know what is the most popular cocktail in Mexico?
It's not a margarita?
No, yeah, not a margarita.
Otherwise, I would not have asked the question, right?
We can eliminate
What
that.
is it?
It is the Paloma. And I don't know if it's as popular
Really?
here, but it is the most popular in Mexico.
Interesting. Yeah, you would think. Definitely margarita.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, we appreciate, excuse me, we appreciate you taking time to be with us today. This is such a fascinating project. I'm going to have to get on there and check it out a little bit more. And maybe when Terry gets home, she can whip me up one of these exotic recipes that y'all have on there.
We have friends of ours who tell us that they don't even cook the
Yeah.
recipe. They just spend hours on their bed at night before going to bed, just reading through the stories, and they don't even cook the recipes.
Right. Yeah, I mean that the
Oh
food
my
is
gosh.
the food is
Yeah,
one
I
thing,
mean,
but the stories behind it all have got to be, the most amazing thing.
Yeah, it's fun to learn. I mean, every day we learn something, even sometimes recipes that we have known all our lives, and we're like, wow, I didn't know, that's how it was created, or, things like
Right.
this. So
Right. I'm sorry, Terry. I didn't mean to cut you
Yeah.
off. You're a little bit
Okay,
delayed.
that's okay. No. I just had this in the back of my head while we were talking to you. I was trying to work it in, but okay, so we are trying new things with tofu. So what's your favorite? Do you like tofu? And what's your favorite dish if you do? And what would be easy? Not real.
all right, we're not so much about easy recipes.
Right.
I know.
No, there's a lot of easy recipes, but not all of them are. My favorite dish with tofu may not be as easy, but it's a stew from Korea, which is called the silky tofu soup, which typically includes some kind of meat, so it could be beef, but it's also made sometimes with seafood. And it's the broth has to be made with seaweed and anchovies, so it's kind of a fishy kind of broth. And then it's piping hot because it's served in a stone bowl, and it's an egg drop soup as well. So you typically add an egg at the end, which because it's piping hot, it's going to cook obviously in a couple minutes. But you use the silk tofu. There's different types of firmness of tofu. So you would use the one that is the most silky, which is it's almost going to look like eggs in it, but it's going to be tofu inside the soup. Like I said, piping hot. It is also very spicy. If any of your listeners is visiting LA, we have a chain of Korean restaurant called BCD Tofu House, which is actually open 24 hours, like Dennis. It is kind of their Dennis in Koreatown, and in making their own tofu, and also their signature dish is this silky tofu soup.
Oh, okay. I haven't tried to make any soup. No, look that up.
It's
All
really
right.
good.
Well, again, Mike, thanks so much for taking time to come on and talk to us. It's been a fascinating, and I wish you much more luck in continuing this project. If you wouldn't mind, just tell people how they can reach out. If somebody wants to reach out and get a hold of you, maybe make a recipe submission, how can they do that?
Absolutely. So the website is 196flavors.com. We are on pretty much all the social media channels. 196 Flavors is our handle. You can contact us on any of those channels as well. We also, there's something we haven't talked about. We have started to write cookbooks, ebooks.
Okay.
So we have 4 available right now.
Okay.
And we intend to have, we have a dozen more in the works for that. Each of them is actually focusing on one region. So far we have one for the Middle Eastern cuisine, for North African cuisine, Southeast Asian, and we just released our Indian subcontinent cuisine book. And again, like I said, we add typically one a month. And actually for the listeners of Feeding Fatty, we are offering 25% off those ebooks. So if you use the code FF25, you will have access to 25% any of our ebooks. And like I said, right now we have 4 available, but we have a dozen more in the works.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks a lot.
That's great.
We appreciate that. I'm sure
Yes.
we'll reach out and take advantage of that ourselves.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
All
I
right.
can do difficult. I don't have to do easy. I can do it.
Yes, you can.
Everybody can do it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Again, you can find us at www.feedingfatty.com. We are also on all the major social media networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And also this copy of this interview video will be placed up on YouTube. We're also, you can find us on all the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify, just to name a few. If we're not on one that you listen to your podcast on, please reach out. I'd be glad to get it added for you. Until next time, I'm Roy. Please take care of yourself.
I'm Terry. Bye.